This week's video in international economics is North Korea launched its first intercontinental ballistic missile. What does that mean? By Matt Stiles and Jonathan Kamen of the Los Angeles Times on July 4th. And indeed, that's the day this incident occurred. So here's a little geography lesson for you. North Korea is off to the left in the upper corner. There's actually, it can be a little hard to see here, but we have China way up at the top. North Korea and China share a border. Korea, which used to be referred to as South Korea, is actually below North Korea and doesn't have a border except for North Korea. Japan is also very close. And then you see that North Korea, actually the capital Pyongyang, is 7,005 miles from Portsmouth. However, as we'll see later in the discussion, about where it says 7,005 miles on the map is about where Alaska is, and Alaska is closer to North Korea than North Korea actually fired its missile. So the issue here is that all of a sudden, North Korea could strike Alaska. So late Tuesday on July 4th, the United States Secretary of State Rex Tillerson acknowledged that North Korea tested an intercontinental ballistic missile. The United States' UN ambassador Nikki Haley and her counterparts from both Japan and Korea have requested an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council to discuss what to do about this new threat. The US and Korea conducted a missile exercise of their own near North Korea, near the border there, as a show of force. North Korea's Hwasong-14 device flew 1,700 miles high, which is actually a little higher than the International Space Station, and landed 500 miles east in the Sea of Japan. Notice that, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, within 1,700 miles, North Korea could hit Alaska. The Trump administration has called for sanctions and dialogue. It has also left open the possibility of a military strike. And at the end of the show, I'm going to talk a little bit about some questions I'm raising. All of these things show up in there. Even if most trade between China and North Korea were canceled, North Korea would still do nuclear activities. This was a declaration by Shi Yinyang of Renmin University in Beijing. His point here is that, contrary to popular belief that China can put pressure on North Korea, there's reason to question that. In other words, she says, even if there was no trade, even if China did cut off total trade, North Korea would still probably go ahead and do this. So what kind of pressure could China put on, short of planning to go into Korea itself, North Korea itself, and wage military action? But here's a couple interesting points. Although China has announced a ban on North Korean coal imports in February, they did this in response to the United Nations rule that said a country that violates security rules, other countries shouldn't trade with them. But even though China has announced this ban, a number of witnesses say coal is still entering China from North Korea. So they may be saying they're doing this and then not really doing it. Also, it's a sort of peculiar statistic that China has actually raised itself. It's in China's own publications that despite this ban, China's trade with North Korea grew 40% during the first quarter, which raises the question, if there's a ban and China's trade actually grew with North Korea 40%, is the ban a problem for North Korea? So here's some questions that I've raised on this topic. The first question, and you can see that the top of this says Bill's questions. That's all it says, so I'm going to move up so you can see the whole thing. The first question is, how does the world deal with North Korea? And I'm posing three options. First, just let them do what they want. There's really no way to stop them. Or, continue to try diplomacy. That might mean sanctions, discussion, anything like that. Or third, should the world deal with North Korea through military action? Well, 2, 3, and 4 consider each possibility in turn. So number 2 says, go ahead and let Korea do what they want. Notice that what this probably means is that the rest of the world will need to sell and give them what they need and want. See, the point is, if the world is not going to let them have what they need, and North Korea is a poor country right now, then there's always this threat they're going to strike. And North Korea has been known to make pretty significant threats here, that if they don't get what they want, they'll strike. Continuing diplomacy, which is something that has bedeviled several American presidents. The article said, and I didn't actually quote that passage, but said that the last 3 presidents have all found diplomacy unsuccessful with North Korea. And yet somehow, if we're still talking about that option, we have to conclude it's unlikely to lead to a solution. And if it doesn't lead to a solution, go back and look at number 2 above. That means sooner or later, North Korea probably just gets to do what they want. And it's probably even going to mean selling or giving them things they want. Now, the last option is military action, which might sound like a no-brainer given 2 and 3. But the problem is, this may lead to millions of deaths. Nothing like the wars that we've occasionally seen in recent history, something more along the lines of world wars. And even if this was not a world war, it could well lead to millions of deaths in North Korea, Korea, and Japan. However, this could easily become World War III and nuclear World War III if China and Russia jumped into the war and decided to side with North Korea. One thing that's interesting to note is that Russia and China did side with North Korea in the 1950s when the Korean War happened. It's no secret that both countries, particularly China, fear that a unification of Korea, if sort of Korea overtook North Korea and they reunified like Germany did, this would be an ally for the United States and would be right there on China's border, a country who is not on particularly good terms with them. Well, take care.